I'm Tay.
I'm Brock, and in this video, we're going to talk about Seattle. So I think one of the first things we should talk about is the weather and the rain, because that's what everyone asks. What's your take on the rain in Seattle?
It's a mist. It is not pouring rain all the time. 90% of the time when it's raining, you don't even need a raincoat or an umbrella or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's overhyped. I think there's kind of just people think it rains and pours every single day. It lightly rains, but also this summer we lucked out and we almost set a record 51 days in a row without a drop of rain. So it just goes to show you, it mists and it's cloudy quite a bit in the winter, but it's not always raining. Would you move here again?
I would stay here longer if we could.
Yeah, we said, I think you were the one who said this, if we had family living in Seattle or living in Washington, it would be really tough for us to move back to California, which we're gonna do this summer.
Yeah.
I think another important thing to consider as we're going through this video is context and neighborhoods and where we live. So like people are familiar with New York City, and then within New York City there's like the boroughs, there's Manhattan and Brooklyn and all those. And then even within those there's small neighborhoods like Chelsea and Soho. Seattle's very similar. So one time I remember someone asked, like, do you guys live in Seattle or just the Seattle area? We live in Seattle. We live in the city, and more specifically, we live in South Lake Union, which is a specific neighborhood in Seattle.
Yeah, when we came to visit Seattle and apartment hunt, Brock was like, do you want to go for like 2-3 days? And I said, no, we need to go for like at least 5 days because we need to walk everywhere and really get a feel for the neighborhood. So we walked everywhere. I think we were walking like 10 miles a day. And picking out our neighborhood, which neighborhood we felt safe in, which one we fit in, what had coffee shops and things to do that we liked, and we landed on South Lake Union. Yeah,
so our experience of Seattle might be different than someone living even just a few blocks away, but I think it's important to note that.
Yeah. What I want to talk about is why we chose South Lake Union specifically. So in South Lake Union, there's a lot of great coffee shops and workout places, which is really important to us. There's also a dog park. There's a regular park, which people take their dogs to all the time. And then we are next to the lake. There's a big grass area there for us to hang out. And then also I'm a runner, so being close to somewhere where I could quickly go out the door and run and be in a peaceful area versus if we were downtown, I would have to run through all of downtown, and that's not as enjoyable.
We've accumulated quite a few favorite places, coffee shops, restaurants, and so we'll just link up our little Yelp map board in the show notes description below the YouTube video if you want to check those out. But I think the coffee shops, right, are a huge draw to Seattle.
Huge coffee city. So there's tons of coffee shops. The only chain you're really going to find is Starbucks, which makes sense. But everything else is a local mom and pop like coffee shop, and they're all fantastic.
Yeah, I love just how pretty and nature focused Seattle is. I mean, like in the city itself, there's like lakes literally in the city and trees and grass and parks. But you're also very central to like national parks and forests and hiking. So there's serious nature close by, and there's quite a bit of nature in the city. Yeah,
like last winter we were able to go up to the mountains every weekend, and it's like maybe a 2-hour trip.
Yeah.
And it was very, very easy to go literally every single weekend. The city is also super walkable. There's a couple hills, but we walked everywhere. The only time we ever had to drive was if something was more than a 15-minute drive away.
Yeah.
So we drove maybe once a week for the entire year and a half that we lived here. And it feels really safe too.
Yeah, and that was important for me to make sure she felt safe, because I feel safe in most places walking around because I have the privilege of being a larger man. But it's a city, and we're downtown pretty much, and you being out by yourself or like taking the dogs to go to the bathroom or going for a run, it was important that you felt safe. And so for 99% of Seattle, I would say we feel safe.
Yeah, I've never really felt super uncomfortable or super unsafe. It's also where Google and Amazon are have their headquarters and are located. So they have a lot of security walking around.
Yeah.
They've really made the areas very nice surrounding their buildings, and the rest of the city has followed. If you have a dog, every single apartment that we toured had a doggy potty area on their roof. So if you are uncomfortable with going out late at night and you have to take your dog out, you don't have to worry about that, which is really nice too.
Yeah. Well, so it's just like any other city, right? Like there's streets and neighborhoods and blocks where it's like, yeah, you don't really want to go there late at night. But just like any other city, there's also places where it's really clean and young and safe. So it's all about the neighborhood you're in. All right, let's talk about who Seattle is not for.
It's not for someone who falls more on the conservative end. Seattle's very liberal, and the city definitely reflects that, and so do its rules and regulations. So
it's not for someone who loves wide open spaces. If that's you, maybe you want to consider the towns and cities around Seattle, which are beautiful. But obviously a city's probably not for you.
Right. Cities are expensive. Seattle is a tech city, which makes it a bit more expensive. There's lots of people working for Amazon and Google here. So just consider your budget and maybe look in the surrounding cities. You can still be very close to Seattle and save a lot of money.
And then also Seattle's not for you if you're very affected by seasonal depression, or the rain or the gloom really makes you sad. Like if you need the sun to be happy, then maybe Seattle isn't the best bet for you. Maybe you should move to Arizona.
Yeah.
On our original list, which is also linked down in the description, we talked about how doing our research after we moved here, we found out that Seattle is actually very dog friendly. After living here for a year and a half, our thoughts are?
We definitely agree. There's lots of parks and dog parks, which everyone takes their dogs to. Everyone walks their dogs everywhere. We take our dogs in line at the coffee shop and they sit with them.
Sorry to interrupt you. Literally, as we're walking right now, this was not planned. There are little like paw prints in the concrete that are just leading into this little restaurant.
I think because it's such an outdoorsy city, so many people love hiking and all of that, it is therefore like a very dog friendly city too.
Absolutely.
And they include a lot of that outdoorsiness. So it's super easy to take your dog everywhere, go to the park, get them exercise. I would say if you have a dog and you want to live in a city, Seattle would be like the city to do it.
Agreed. So as you're driving into Seattle, or if you hear about Seattle in the news, you might hear about the population of people experiencing homelessness here. And what I will say is that just like any city, there's going to be a concentrated, higher volume of homeless people than in the countryside. But also, it is a little bit higher in Seattle. I think that the rate of homelessness in Seattle is a little bit higher.
Probably higher than some major cities. There's a couple things to consider. The weather is more mild than, say, Chicago.
Very true.
Also, because Seattle's a little bit more liberal, there's a lot more resources for people experiencing homelessness. So a lot more soup kitchens and shelters and things like that to assist them in getting out of homelessness.
Yeah, and so if that's something that really bothers you, then maybe a city in general isn't for you. Maybe Seattle isn't for you. But I have to say, living here for a year and a half, like we said earlier, we've never felt unsafe. People experiencing homelessness are still human beings. They're still people. And that should go without saying. But here's something to think about when you're moving to a city.
Yeah, we've never felt uncomfortable or unsafe around anyone experiencing homelessness or anything like that. It's definitely not something I worry about. Thank you for watching. If you have any other questions about Seattle or the surrounding areas, leave a comment and we'll answer those.
And also, like I said earlier in the description, is our recommendation of all of our favorite coffee shops. Sushi, which we didn't even talk about, which we tried about 100 different sushi places in Seattle.
Yeah.
And all that. So thanks so much for watching. Consider subscribing and let us know if you have any questions.